The Forbidden Animal Files, declassified projects that changed reality. In 1988, a French researcher named René Pioch built a tiny robot. He called it a taikoscope. Inside its metallic body was a random number generator. Left alone in an empty room, the robot did exactly what the math says it should do. It wandered randomly. No pattern, no preference, no purpose. It had no brain, no eyes, no feelings, no reason to care where it went. Then Pioch let a batch of newborn chicks hatch in front of it, and this is where the story becomes strange. Because of a survival trigger called imprinting, newborn chicks attach themselves to the first moving object they see. Usually, that object is their mother, but in this case, the first moving object they saw was a small metal robot. So to the chicks, this machine was not just a machine, it was its mother. Once that bond was formed, Pioch placed the chicks inside a glass cage in the far corner of the room. Then he released the robot. Mathematically, nothing should have changed. The robot should have wandered across the room randomly, just like before, but it didn't. As the chicks chirped from behind the glass, desperately wanting their mother to come closer, the robot's movement appeared to change. It no longer behaved like a machine moving randomly. It spent far more time near the chicks' cage than chance predicted, almost as if the chicks were pulling it. Not with sound, not with force, not with wires, but with intention. Let that sink in. A group of newborn birds may have influenced the movement of a random machine simply because they wanted their mother near them. Now, mainstream science does not accept this as proof that consciousness can bend probability, but the question is unforgettable. If even a tiny part of this is real, then consciousness may not be locked inside the brain. It may not be just a private experience inside the skull. It may behave more like a field, a force, a signal. And if a newborn chick can influence a machine through biological desire, what else are animals doing that we cannot see? This is AnimalDex, and today we're opening the Forbidden Animal Files. Not just the cute facts, not just the basic nature documentary version. We're going into the experiments, the declassified projects, the ancient codes, the strange death behaviors, and the hidden question behind all of it. What if animals are not just animals? What if they are living receivers? What if they are tuned into frequencies humans forgot how to hear? And what if ancient people knew this long before modern science started to catch up? To understand that, we have to go from the chicks to the worms that may have eaten memory. In the 1950s and 60s, University of Michigan biologist James V. McConnell wanted to answer one of the deepest questions in science. Where does memory actually live? Most of us are taught that memory lives in the brain, and memory is stored in neurons, in synapses, in electrical connections. But McConnell was not satisfied with that answer, so he turned to one of the strangest creatures on Earth, the planarian flatworm. Planarian flatworms are tiny, simple animals with an almost supernatural ability to regenerate. Cut one in half, and the head grows a new tail. The tail grows a new head, a new brain, a new nervous system, a new version of the animal. McConnell trained these worms using light cues and mild electric shocks until they learned a specific behavior. Then he did something radical. He cut the trained worms in half. The top half regrew a tail, bottom half regrew a head, and then he tested them again. The shocking claim was that both regenerated halves seemed to retain traces of the training. Even the half that had grown a completely new brain appeared to remember. Think about what that means. If the brain was destroyed and rebuilt, the memories still remained, then maybe memory was not only in the brain. Maybe something about the experience was stored deeper in the body. But McConnell pushed it further. He took trained worms, ground them up, and fed them to untrained worms. It sounds like a horror film, but the result became one of the most controversial claims in animal research. The worms that ate the trained worms appeared to learn faster than the normal worms, as if it had digested experience, as if knowledge had been physically transferred through the body. McConnell suggested that memory might be stored chemically, possibly in the RNA, distributed through the organism. Mainstream science heavily criticized these experiments, and many researchers struggled to reproduce the results. But the question never fully disappeared, because modern regeneration research still asks something similar. How does a body remember its shape? How does a flatworm regrow the right head in the right place? How does a salamander know where the missing limb belongs? Where is the blueprint? If memory is only in the brain, why does the body behave as if it knows what it is supposed to become? This is where animal science begins to sound ancient, because old traditions always said that the body remembers. Instinct lives in the blood. Trauma lives in the flesh. Ancestral memory lives in the body. Maybe that was a metaphor, or maybe metaphor was the only language they had for something we are only beginning to measure. And this leads us into one of the most strangest animal experiments ever whispered through the Cold War, the Soviet rabbit submarine experiment. The story story comes from the shadowy world of the Soviet parapsychology. In the West, people call it ESP. The Soviets preferred a colder phrase, biological radio communication. The claim is deeply controversial, but unforgettable. Researchers took a mother rabbit and connected it to monitoring equipment in a shielded laboratory on shore. Then they took her newborn babies and loaded them into a submarine. The submarine submerged deep into the ocean, miles of water, heavy steel, distance, silence, everything that should block ordinary communication. At scheduled intervals, the baby rabbits were killed, one by one. At the exact moment each baby died, the mother rabbit's brainwaves and heart activity spiked back in the shore laboratory. If true, normal electromagnetic signals should not have explained it. The shielding, distance, and ocean should not have blocked known communication. The implication was disturbing. Maybe living beings share a non-local distress signal, a biological frequency of connection, a bond that cuts through physical barriers. Again, mainstream science does not accept this as proven, but the reason the story survives is because it touches something humans have observed for thousands of years. The mother knows, the pack knows, the herd knows, the flock knows. A dog waits at the door before owners arrive. Birds vanish before a storm. Cats react to an empty corner. Horses become still before danger. Elephants gather around bones. And sometimes, animals seem to know when death is near. Not just their own death, ours. There are stories of dogs refusing to leave the bedside of a dying owner. Cats curling up beside people shortly before they pass. Birds going silent. Horses becoming unusually calm. Elephants touching the bones of dead relatives with their trunks. Dolphins supporting dying companions to the surface so they could breathe. Whales carrying dead young through the ocean for days. Chimpanzees sitting quietly around a dying group member. This is not simple movement. It looks like recognition, mourning, goodbye, and in some cases, prediction. Many humans near death report strange experiences. They say they see deceased relatives. They say they feel someone waiting for them. They say the room changes. They say they know it's time. And strangely, animals sometimes behave as if they know too. Cats are especially mysterious here. Many people report that a cat will hide, leave the house, or run away shortly before death. The normal explanation is practical. A sick animal becomes vulnerable, so it hides away from predators. That makes sense. But anyone who has lived with cats knows there is something more haunting about them. The cat becomes quiet, distant, focused, as if it's listening to something. As if it's been called away. Sometimes it seeks solitude, sometimes it seeks its owner, sometimes it disappears. Almost like it knows the boundary is near. Maybe cats detect changes in smell, temperature, breathing, hormones, and body chemistry. Maybe dogs hear shifts in movement and motion. Maybe elephants feel distress through deep vibration. Maybe birds sense pressure and electromagnetic changes. Or maybe animals are still tuned into layers of reality that humans have filtered out. This is where the forbidden question begins. If animals can sense things before humans can explain them, are they predicting the future? Or are they simply reading signals we are too numb to notice? And if those signals exist, why is mainstream science so uncomfortable with them? At this point, an obvious question appears. If even some of this is true, why don't we hear about it? Why is it not taught in schools? Why does mainstream science instantly laugh, dismiss, or attack anything that suggests consciousness might be more than brain chemistry? Researchers like Rupert Sheldrake and writers like Graham Hancock have argued that the issue is not just evidence, it is worldview. People think modern science has given us medicine, electricity, satellites, antibiotics, computers, and space travel. But modern science is also heavily influenced by financial gains, philosophy called materialism. Materialism says that reality is made only of physical matter. Your thoughts are brain activity. Your memories are stored in neurons. Your emotions are chemical reactions. Your consciousness is produced by the brain. So if someone suggests that consciousness may extend beyond the brain, and that animals may sense death before it happens, and that memory exists in fields, and that intention may influence random systems, that life may be connected through invisible forms of communication, it does not just challenge one experiment, it challenges the entire operating system. It threatens the assumption that everything real must be mechanical, measurable, local, and physical. And this is why these subjects become dangerous. Not dangerous because they automatically become true. Dangerous because they ask the wrong kind of question. They ask whether the universe is dead matter or living mind. Sheldrake argues that mainstream science acts as if it's open-minded, but certain topics are treated as forbidden before the evidence is even examined. Telepathy, animal premonition, non-local memory, near-death experiences, the sense of being stared at, animals knowing when their owners are coming home. These topics are not always rejected because they have completely been disproven. Often they are rejected because they violate the materialist belief system. In other words, the door is closed before the experiment even begins. And this is what makes animal research so fascinating, because animals do not care about human philosophy. A dog doesn't know what materialism is. A cat does not care about peer review. A crow does not care about academic reputation. Animals simply behave, and sometimes their behavior creates a problem for the official story. This is why Rupert Sheldrake becomes so interested in animal behavior. Sheldrake suggested that animals may be connected to their owners through something like a field, not a metaphorical field, a real extended connection between minds. This became part of his wider theory of morphic resonance, the idea that nature has a memory, not just individual memory, collective memory. According to this theory, species share invisible informational fields. If one group of animals learns something in one place, it may become easier for other animals of the same species to learn it somewhere else, as if knowledge is uploaded into species-level cloud. One of the examples often discussed involves early memory experiments with rats. In the 1920s, researchers trained generations of rats to escape a difficult water maze. The first generation had made many mistakes. Later generations improved dramatically. That alone could be explained by breeding, selection, or training. But the strange part came when similar experiments were reported in distant labs using unrelated rats. According to the morphic resonance interpretation, rats elsewhere seemed to improve faster, as if the species itself had become better at the task. Sheldrake argued that this was not genetics, it was field memory, a hidden habit of nature. Again, mainstream science does not treat morphic resonance as proven, but as concept. It asks one of the most addictive questions in biology. What if memory does not only live inside the individual? What if memory also lives in the pattern of species? Souls reincarnating. And if something sounds impossible, remember, animals already live inside worlds we cannot access. Dogs live in scent, bats live in echo, dolphins see through sound, birds sense magnetic fields, snakes read heat, fish detect pressure and electrical changes in the water, elephants communicate through low frequency vibrations that travel through the ground. We call our world reality, but maybe it is just one channel. Animals are tuned into many, and governments knew this, but they did not treat animals as simple machines. They treated them as biological technology. During World War II, the US military launched Project X-Ray, a classified plan to turn Mexican free-tailed bats into living airborne arson weapons. The idea was to attach tiny timed devices to bats and place them inside specialized bomb casings and drop them over Japanese cities. The bats would then wake up, scatter into attics, roofs, and wooden structures, and then the device would ignite. A single bomb would not start one fire, it could start thousands. During testing, some armed bats escaped and accidentally set fire to military buildings at a US test site. The project was eventually cancelled, not because the idea was completely impossible, but because another weapon arrived faster, the atomic bomb. Then by the 1960s, the CIA launched one of the strangest animal intelligence projects ever documented, Project Acoustic Kitty. The goal was to turn a house cat into a walking listening device, not by putting a microphone on a collar, but by surgically modifying the animal. Surgeons implanted a microphone in the cat's ear canal, a radio transmitter in its skull, a battery pack in its body, and a thin wire antenna hidden through the fur of its tail. The goal was simple. A cat could walk near Soviet diplomats without attracting suspicion. A living spy device. The project costing millions and took years of development, but the first field test became legendary for all the wrong reasons. The cat was released near a target area, wandered into the street, and was allegedly struck by a taxi. The project was cancelled, but the real lesson is not that the project failed. The real lesson is that the CIA believed animal biology could be engineered into intelligence technology. They were not laughing at animal perception, they were funding it, studying it, trying to control it, and the Navy took this even further. The US Navy Marine Mammal Program trained dolphins and sea lions for underwater military tasks. Dolphins could use echolocation to detect mines. Sea lions could locate objects in dark water and attach recovery devices. These animals could operate in environments where human divers and machines struggle. Because animals do not just live in our reality, they live in sensory worlds we can barely imagine. The more we study them, the more the human-centered view of intelligence falls apart. A crow can understand zero. That sounds simple until you realize zero is not an object. Zero is an abstraction. It means absent has a position. Nothing becomes something. Researchers found that crows could simply treat quantity as a numerical value. A bird looked at nothing and understood it as a category. Cleaner wrasse fish can outperform primates in certain economic strategy tests. In the wild, these fish run cleaning stations on coral reefs. Some client fish will wait, others will leave it if not served quickly. So the cleaner wrasse must know which client to serve first. It is not just swimming around, it is making market decisions. Then there is slime mold, not even an animal. No brain, no nervous system, no central control. But when researchers placed food in a pattern matching Tokyo and surrounding cities, the slime mold grew a network connecting the food sources in a way that looks shockingly similar to the Tokyo rail system. Efficient, redundant, optimized. A brainless organism solved the network problem. So maybe intelligence is not one ladder. Maybe intelligence is a pattern, a system, a field, a way life organizes itself. And this brings us to Dr. Harold Saxton Burr at Yale University. Burr studied what he called fields of life, or L fields. Using sensitive instruments, he measured electrical patterns around living organisms. He believed that living bodies are shaped by invisible electrical fields, not just after they grow, but before they grow. One of the most fascinating claims from his work involved embryos. Burr suggested that the electrical field around a developing organism could show us the pattern of an adult body before the body had even fully formed. In simple terms, the blueprint appears before the flesh. The body grows into a pattern. Life is not just chemistry. Life is also electrical organization. A body may be more like a song than a machine. A pattern held in rhythm, and that leads us to Kirlian photography. In 1939, Semyon Kirlian discovered that when objects are placed on a photographic plate and exposed to a high voltage electrical field, glowing corona patterns appear around them. To esoteric researchers, this looked like the first photograph of the aura, the life force, the luminous body. This became known as the phantom leaf effect. Mainstream science usually explains Kirlian effects through moisture, pressure, and voltage, and electrical discharge, but symbolically, the image is hard to forget. The physical body changes, but the pattern seems to linger. The flesh is gone, but the ghost of the former remains, because long before laboratories, intelligence agencies, or EEG machines, ancient people already treated animals as if they carried hidden knowledge. They did not see animals as lesser biological objects. They saw them as archetypes, living codes, vibrational blueprints, symbols of cosmic forces. If you open the biblical text of Ezekiel or the book of Revelation, you find descriptions of a bizarre multidimensional entity later known as the Tetramorph, a single living creature with four distinct faces, a human, a lion, an ox, and an eagle. In medieval and Renaissance art, this was not just drawn as a literal monster, it was a visual code book, a map of the four foundational pillars of earthly and spiritual reality. The lion represented the frequency of raw sovereignty, courage, and the wild force of the untamed wilderness. The ox represented endurance, physical labor, sacrifice, and grounded domestic stability. The eagle represented high ascension, panoramic vision, and the ability to move effortlessly through the spiritual ethereal realms. And the human represented conscious intelligence, empathy, and the synthesis of all lower animal traits into a single will. The message was not random. It was a system, a spiritual AnimalDex. Each creature was not just an animal, it was a key. And this pattern appears again in the medieval bestiaries. Bestiaries were gorgeously illuminated animal picture books created by monks during the Middle Ages. But they were not just science books. They were not trying to draw scientifically accurate anatomy. In medieval Christian art, the pelican was often shown piercing her own chest to feed her dying chicks with her blood. Symbolically, it became one of the strongest images of sacrifice ever created. A bird opening its own body to give life to its young. The pelican became the frequency of life-giving sacrifice. Then there was the stag. Ancient art often showed deer near sacred water. baptismal fonts and spiritual scenes. Part of this comes from the biblical line, "As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you." But in older lore, the stag was also believed to have natural radar for purity. It could sniff out hidden, clean underground springs. It was even said to hunt or destroy serpents. So the stag became more than a gentle animal. It became a tracker of light, the seeker of clean water, the creature that cuts through lower deceptive forces. The ancients did not look down on animals, they decoded them. They used animals to understand the hidden mechanics of reality. And maybe this is the part we forgot. Maybe they were preserving a map, a lion at the gate, a serpent in the garden, a dove over water, a raven at the battlefield, a whale in the deep, an eagle above the throne, a lamb at the altar, a stag at the spring, a cat at the threshold. These were not random creatures. They were symbols of forces, ways of being, frequencies of consciousness. So what makes humans different? From a strictly biological standpoint, humans are animals. We belong to the kingdom Animalia. We might share DNA with chimpanzees and bonobos, but maybe we didn't evolve. Maybe we devolved from different frequencies. The eagle is tuned to height and vision. The serpent is tuned to vibration and transformation. The stag is tuned to purity and hidden water. The lion is tuned to command. The whale is tuned to deep memory. The cat is tuned to silence, timing, and invisible motion. Maybe ancient people understood this better than we do. Maybe they never were just animals. Maybe they were the original language, the first symbols, the living codes. And maybe the real question is not, do animals think like humans? The real question is, why do animals have their own frequencies and humans are a collection of all frequencies? Subscribe to AnimalDex for the forbidden animal files, because every creature has a secret and we are building the collection, one animal at a time.